Ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to build a tiny home. I grew up watching tiny home build videos and told myself that when I grow up, I'm gonna build a tiny home. But now I'm 32, I have the best YouTube audience in the world, and I'm finally gonna build one. The hardest part about this build for me was having the balls to spend $7,500 on this flatbed trailer, because there was a lot of other trailers that I could have got for cheaper, but I really wanted one that would be at least 8 feet wide, and I also wanted it to be as heavy duty as possible. So after talking myself into making this expensive purchase along with the help of the salesman, I finally did it and brought it over to my house. I started by installing the subfloor and first put down this 1/2 inch OSB that has a built-in vapor barrier, then filled all the gaps and cracks with spray foam and insulated the crap out of it. In order to support the 3/4 inch subfloor, I cut down these pieces of 2x4s and self-tapped them directly into the frame. I used 4-inch wood to metal self-tapping screws and spread the 2x4s apart every 10 inches. Before installing the subfloor, I spread out some of this construction adhesive just to make sure this floor isn't super squeaky after we screw it in. I'm using 3/4 inch tongue and groove OSB to make sure they can lock together, and using a bunch of glue and screws to secure it to the frame. I ran a chalk line on the subfloor where all the studs are and screwed in 2-inch screws every 10 inches. But then just like that, the subfloor was all finished up and it was officially time to start building out the frame. I spent a couple days drawing out all the plans with the exact measurements, then started framing out all the walls on the flatbed because that was a nice level surface, which ended up taking Hope and I a solid 2 days to do, but we took our time measuring and cutting everything out because we don't want to go back and have to reframe a wall. After we finished framing out all the walls, it was time to stand them up. I ran a bead of this construction adhesive where the first wall will go, then started placing the walls one by one exactly where they go with the help of my wife and my amazing neighbors Dale and Kathy. It took us about an hour and a half to put all the walls in their place, and we were pretty nervous because if they didn't fit, we would have to take the frames back down and reframe them. But everything ended up fitting together nice and snug, which was a huge relief. But I then went around the entire frame and used Simpson tie screws and nails to lock them all together. To make sure that the house frame is securely fastened to the trailer, I picked up these 10-inch lag bolts that I'm going to put through the entire frame and the chassis, and I used some lock washers, Loctite, and lock nuts to put it all together. I installed 3 of these on each side of the tiny home, then installed 4-inch wood to metal self-tapping screws every 10 inches to make sure this tiny home is properly secured to the frame. Now that the walls are framed out, I'm adding a double top plate to help make this building a little more rigid. The trailer came with a bunch of pressure treated 2x10s, so I figured let's reuse them so we can save some money. I cut them down to 5.5 inches because they're going to work as the frame for our loft. After we finished framing out the loft, we installed some of these hangers for some extra support. Now that the loft is framed out, it's time to install the ridge beam. My neighbor Bill ended up coming over to help out, and he has a bunch of experience building all types of things, so it was really nice to get a second opinion on all the ideas that I had to build this tiny home, because after all, it is my first one. For the ridge beam, we're installing a 22-foot LVL plank that we picked up at a local lumber yard. And we basically just set it into these temporary supports that we made while we install the rafters. We came up with the measurements, then started cutting down all the rafters to size. We screwed hangers onto the ridge beam, then went ahead and started installing all the rafters. Once the rafters were finished up, it was time to install the fascia boards. We're using regular 2x6 boards and nailing them directly onto the rafters. After we finished installing all the fascia boards, we did some blocking. Then it was time to add the strips for the metal roof. We're using regular 2x4s and spacing them apart every 24 inches. These are basically going to work as supports so we can screw in our metal roof. But after 2 weeks of framing, the entire tiny home was all framed out. Now that the framing is finished up, it's time to put sheathing on the entire exterior of this tiny home. We're installing 1/2-inch OSB and using H-clips in between all the panels for expansion and contraction. At this point of the build, we were about 2 weeks in and had spent $9,403 including the trailer, which isn't super bad seeing how much we've got done so far. I can't imagine how much it would cost or even how long it would take if we were building an actual 3,000 or 4,000 square foot home. Which to me it seems kind of unnecessary to have something so big. If you have a tiny home, you're not going to overconsume and you'll have a lot more freedom because you also won't have as many bills. After we installed all the sheathing, we went around the entire tiny home and nailed the sheathing into all the studs. I then cut all the window holes out with my skill saw and the entire tiny home was all boarded up. The next step was to install the house wrap to try and waterproof this thing because we're expecting rain in the next couple of days and I don't want any of the OSB to get wet. This was a lot harder to do than it seemed, but thankfully I had my wife and Bill to help me out and we got it done in just a couple of hours. Once the house wrap was installed, it was time to install the windows. I'm going to get a little into detail while installing this window to show you guys how I do it. I cut the house wrap so it folds over the window entrance, then added some flashing tape at the bottom and worked my way up. I then added these bow tie looking things to each corner before installing the side pieces. I then added silicone adhesive to the window and fit it into place. I made sure it was level, then nailed it into the frame. After nailing it into place, I added some more flashing tape starting from the bottom and working my way up. Then the entire window was completely installed. I then basically repeated the exact same process on the rest of the windows for the entire tiny home. Then, with the help of my neighbor Bill, went ahead and started installing the door. I cut out the kick plate with a good old handsaw so we can make way for the door. Then basically did the same thing I did for the windows for the door. We added shims in between the door frame and the house frame and screwed it in. Now that the windows and doors are all finished up, it's time to install the metal roof. But first we're installing this drip edge around the entire border of the roof framing, which is made to help drip water away from the house. I use my tin snips to cut it and make it look as seamless as possible, but this stuff is really hard to install and I'm nowhere near a professional at doing it, but I'm trying my best and the only way to get good at it is by doing it over and over again, so I'm gonna give it a shot. I found that bending it over a 2x4 gives you a nice clean corner, so that's how I finished up the rest of them. I then added some more of this metal flashing to the corner here and started from the bottom and stacked them on top of each other till I got to the top. This corner is where both the roof pitches meet, which is really susceptible for leakage, so I made sure to flash it to the best of my ability to make sure it doesn't leak. But then just like that, the drip edge was all finished up and it was time to install the roof. In order to install the roof, it needs to have an underlayment. So we picked up this high temperature ice and water shield. It's non-granulated and specially made for metal roofs, and this sucker took 2 weeks to come in the mail and ran me 250 bucks. To install it, I started from the bottom and stuck it onto the 2x4s, then overlapped the top piece so water flows off. Once the ice and water shield was installed, it was time to measure and cut the metal roof to size. We stacked all the metal roof panels for that size and cut them all at the same time to have the exact same measurement. We then measured where all the holes for the screws would be and pre-drilled through all the panels before putting them on the roof. We next brought them onto the roof one by one and only put one screw into each panel just in case we need to shift them around a little bit. Then repeated the same process over and over and overlapped the ribs on top of the other panel so water doesn't leak in. The last piece needed to be cut to size, so to do that we picked up one of these automatic scissor snips that you just connect to your drill. I'll link it in the description below with a bunch of other tools that we used. I'm also going to link these socks that my neighbor Bill put me onto, because while we were working together the topic of sweaty feet somehow got brought up. Since we're always doing construction, and I'll tell you, these things are a freaking game changer. I highly recommend you to get yourself a pair. They guarantee that your feet won't sweat because they're made out of wool. They last like 10 years and they're made in North Carolina, which is right next to me, which is why I support them. And I know it might sound strange to talk about socks on a building channel, but they're targeted for people who do construction and they'll make sure you don't get any blisters, so that's why I'm promoting them. I'll put a code with 10% off in the description below. After putting all the roof panels into place, I drove a screw into each hole and made sure to screw it in as straight as possible because there's a gasket that I want to lay as flush as possible. I then sealed the bottom of all the panels with this foam and finished screwing in the roof. I added some more of this foam sealer where the ridge cap will go. And this foam is just made so bugs don't come live inside of your roof. But after installing it, it was time to install the ridge cap. I made sure the ridge cap would hang about an inch over the roof line, then screwed it in on every other rib. I then added some silicone adhesive where both rib caps would meet and overlaid it about 7 inches to make sure it doesn't leak. But then just like that, the entire roof was all finished up. Now that the roof is done, it's time to install the fascia caps. These are 6-inch galvanized fascia caps that I spray painted black. I basically just use my tin snips and this tin bending tool to make the fascia caps look as nice as possible before installing them. This was a really tedious process to do and it took me about 2.5 days to get it done from start to finish because I really tried to take my time to make them look as nice as possible because this is the finished product. And I used black finish nails to secure them. Now that the fascia caps are all finished up, it's time to install the siding. We're using 4x8 engineered siding boards, cutting them to size and repeating the same process over and over until all of them are installed. All these siding pieces ended up costing me $560. The materials for the roof was $1,190 and all the fascia caps were $210, bringing the total so far to $13,018 so far in this build. It took us about 6 hours to install all the siding pieces, and we left a few spots without siding because we're going to be installing cladding that'll hold up a different type of siding. Before installing the cladding pieces, we're stapling on some screen so bugs don't get in. Air will come up from the bottom of the cladding pieces, allowing it to vent out moisture, which is why we decided to install the screen. We then nailed down a bunch of pressure treated slats every 16 inches. Before installing the cladding, we added a corner trim piece to cap it off. We then added a slat at the bottom that's a ½ inch thick to give all the siding pieces a slant. These are 8-inch wide siding pieces that we picked up from Lowe's. We just cut them to size, then nailed them onto the slats using galvanized finish nails. We overlapped the second piece by 1 inch and only put a couple nails into it, then pulled out our Greco siding jig. These jigs are pretty cool because they space out all your siding pieces so you don't need to measure, making the process nice and quick. But we then repeated the same process over and over until all the siding pieces were installed. Installing the siding pretty much took up the entire day, and we're also going to be installing board and batten on the rest of the house. But since it's going to trim off all the walls, we need to install the soffit first so the trim pieces can butt up against the soffit, giving it a nice finished look. We added some mounting blocks to the rafters so we have a mounting point for the soffit. Started framing out our bird boxes, then came over to the soffit pieces and made some measurements. We drilled a bunch of holes through the soffit pieces to allow air to come in through the soffit and out the roof, allowing it to breathe. We sanded the holes, then added the same color stain to try to make them look as nice as possible. Then flipped them over and stapled screen over all the holes so no bugs will get in. Once we finished drilling all the holes and installing the screen, we brought the soffit pieces onto the house and nailed them into place. We're installing these with 18 gauge finish nails so you can barely see the holes. We finished trimming off our bird boxes and repeated the same process over and over until all the soffit pieces were installed. All the soffit pieces cost me $536, bringing the total to $13,554 so far in this build. Since some of the soffit is going to be exposed, I painted the edges black with exterior paint just to give it a nice sharp look. We painted all the bird boxes black to match the fascia caps, then just like that, the entire soffit was all finished up. Now that the soffit's finished up, we're going to paint the front door. We wiped it down with acetone to make sure the paint sticks properly, and rolled down a few layers of this brown paint to match the soffit. We let it dry overnight, then brought it back into the house and reinstalled it. Once the door was back on, it was time to install the rest of the siding. We're spacing these board and batten pieces out by 2 feet, and we used our laser level to make sure they're nice and straight. To frame the house, all the batten pieces were 3.5 inches wide, and all the skinnier pieces were 1.5 inches wide, which in my opinion makes everything look nice and uniform. But after 2.5 days of work, the entire siding was all finished up. Once the siding was installed, we wanted to add caulking onto all the cracks and over all the nail holes. This took us another 2 days to do, and it was super time consuming. I hated every second of it. This is going to make it look so much better after we paint, and we've already put in so many weeks of work, we're not going to slack off now. After all the caulking dried, it was finally time to paint. We started by trimming off all the edges with a paintbrush. We're not spraying this tiny home because the siding's going to be 2 different colors, and masking it off is just going to be a ton of work, so we just decided to paint it by hand. We're going for a southern charm look, so the board and batten will be beige and the rest of the siding will be green. And now for the final cost of the entire exterior of this build. We had spent $13,554 so far, but after buying all the board and batten pieces, caulking, galvanized nails, and paint, it brought up the price to $14,987. We were expecting to spend around 15 grand, so this came extremely close. While Hope finished doing final touches on the paint, I went ahead and decided to install the doorknob. This type of doorknob has a handle that requires you to drill a hole at the bottom for a mounting point, and we went with black so it can match the soffit. Now that the exterior part of this tiny home is finished up, it's time to build out the inside. We started by framing out 2 smaller walls that will separate the tiny home from the bathroom. Each wall that I'm framing out is going to be 30 inches wide, leaving a 28-inch opening for the door. After putting it together, I raised it into place and screwed it into the tiny home. Now that the wall's all framed up, I picked up this Romex 14-2 and this electrical panel so I could start wiring up the tiny home. I started by marking 16 inches where all my receptacle boxes will go, and another line above it so I can drill all my holes to run all my wires. After drilling the holes, I went ahead and nailed on the receptacle boxes. I then started running the wire through all the holes and into the receptacle boxes. I ran the wire into the box and left some extra slack for when I install my outlets. And I installed one of these wire fasteners to every wire going in and out of a box. I ran 14 2 wires into the receptacles that won't pull a lot of power, and a thicker 10-2 wire for the induction cooktop. Now that the wires are ran into the receptacle boxes, it's time to install the breaker panel. This is a 100 amp main breaker panel with 24 slots, so it should be more than enough for this tiny home. After securing the panel to the studs, I broke away the metal ring openings and started drilling holes. And before running my wires into the panel, I installed these clamps to hold them into place. I then installed a piece of blocking underneath the panels that I can fasten all the wires to. I slid the wires into the panel and left a bunch of extra slack, then secured the wires to the blocking. After running all my wires into the box, I installed these metal wire protectors so no one screws into them by accident. But then just like that, all the receptacle boxes were installed. So I got here this morning and got the scare of my life. I went to go put the camera on the tripod, and there's a little freaking bee on top of it. So let's see if we can get this little freaking guy outside. All right, so, oh, come on. All right, so I got him on this piece of paper right here. Let's see if we can put him outside without getting stung. I'll leave him there for now. Before running all the wires for the lights, I need to drill a bunch of holes in the rafters so I can slide the wires through. And instead of getting up there and wasting a bunch of time measuring every single one, I'm gonna use this Fantic laser level that I'm gonna set up on this tripod right here. And it's gonna make a nice line up there, so it could save me a bunch of time and I know exactly where to drill. Alright, so all the holes are drilled. It obviously leaves a crazy mess, but now that they're all drilled, we're gonna go ahead and run our wire. After running all the wires for the lights, I installed the box that will hold all the switches, then started to connect my 50 amp service wire to the breaker panel. I've been doing electrical for quite some time, but I'm still not a professional electrician. But if you're gonna do electrical on your own, I recommend you to reach out to your local electrician if you don't want to end up like this guy. After installing all my 6-gauge cables, I went ahead and installed the bus bar for all my ground wires. I then continued on to connect all my home runs to all my circuit breakers and kept it nice and organized to make sure it looks nice and meets code. Once I finished installing all my breakers, I had to install my 50 amp service plug to the outside of the tiny home. This is how the entire tiny home will have electricity, which we'll plug in once we move it to the land that we plan to park it on. After installing the 50 amp service connection, I installed these protectors to the panel. Then just like that, all the wiring was all finished up. Alright, so now that the wiring's all finished up, we picked up this PEX right here so we can run all the plumbing inside of all the walls. I started by drilling a bunch of 3/4 inch holes that all my PEX can run through. This was a pain in the ass to do and left a crazy mess, but after 45 minutes of drilling, I ran the PEX through all the holes. I got all these materials from plumbingcell.com. It's a lot faster to just go online and get it from them than to go to your local hardware store and pick out all these individual pieces to make your plumbing system work, and it ends up being cheaper at the end. This took me years to figure out, and believe me, if you plan on doing your own plumbing project, just go to plumbingcell.com. It's gonna save you a bunch of time and a ton of money. I'll link their website in the description below, as well as all the tools that I use in this project. So now that we have all the PEX ran inside of all the walls, we're gonna install these little metal things right on the outside of the studs, just so nobody accidentally screws into any of the PEX. We got all the wire protectors installed onto all the studs. Now we're gonna install these pool noodle thingies to insulate all the PEX. We have all of our electrical installed and all the plumbing finished up. Now we're gonna install this R13 insulation right here in between all the studs. This insulation is made out of fiberglass, so I'm gonna go ahead and put on a mask and some gloves because this stuff gets you super itchy, and I don't wanna be itchy. Insulation is coming together really nicely, and it has these little flaps right here where we can staple them onto the stud, but since some of the studs are closer together and it doesn't fit, we're gonna have to cut the insulation to size, and we won't have a spot to staple it on, but it should still be okay. Now that the walls are insulated, I'm on my way to Lowe's to pick up a bunch of shiplap so I can hopefully start closing off some of these walls, so then I can go ahead and install cabinets and hopefully finish up this tiny home. Just got here to Lowe's, and a little trick that I do on big orders is I order everything online. That way I don't need to go inside of the store and pick everything out, because that takes a long time to do and it's a lot easier when they load it up for you. We got the shiplap, now we're gonna unload it off the truck, cut it to size so we can start covering up some of these walls. We finished installing all the shiplap, but we don't want the entire tiny home to be pure shiplap. So on the living room, we're gonna go ahead and make a nice accent wall just to kind of split things up. I know it's black, but trust the process. Picked up these pine slats that we're gonna nail onto this wall like this, and we're gonna spread them out by about an inch a piece to make a nice slatted wall, giving this tiny home a much more luxurious feel. A much more luxury feel. I don't know, whatever, let's go. Before installing the slats, I cut them in half to make them skinnier to save on weight and money. Then I took my time staining them before installing them. I secured them to the wall using 18 gauge finish nails and spaced them out by an inch and a half. So we got the slatted wall all finished up. Now we're gonna install this trim right here around all the windows. This wall right here is going to be the kitchen wall where the sink and the stove is going to go, and we want to tile the entire thing, so we cut out these pieces of hardy board that we're going to screw onto the wall so the tile can stick properly to the hardy board. Before installing the kitchen cabinets, we're gonna tile this wall just to make things a little easier so the cabinets aren't in the way. I started off by putting a thin layer of tile adhesive on the corner and adding this trim piece. I then started laying the tiles one by one, making sure they're plumb and square so everything looks nice and symmetrical as I go up the wall. And to cut the tile, I used this manual tile cutter because it's cheap and it works great. But I then repeated the same process over and over until I got to the top. Got 4.5 rows all finished up and it's looking pretty damn good. I love the way it looks with the wall over there. Now we have a couple more rows to do. We're trying to keep them nice and straight so everything looks nice and symmetrical, but we're gonna go all the way up to the ceiling. Then we'll let it dry for a day so then we can go ahead and grout. Alright, so all the walls are installed and I now need to start building stairs on this wall right here so we can get up into the loft. And I've never done this before, so I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So what I'm doing now is cutting out these pieces of this maple plywood because I'm going to be building the cabinet that will hold the fridge and the microwave. And I need to make these cuts as nice as possible, so I'm using my track saw to do it. And this is gonna be the only custom cabinet in the whole entire build, so I gotta make it match the other ones, which is gonna be a little bit difficult, but I think we can manage to do it. So I got all my pieces cut out. Now I'm gonna use this pocket hole jig to drill a bunch of pocket holes in all the pieces so I can screw them together. After drilling all the pocket holes, we glued on some edge band to cover up all the exposed plywood edges. The cabinet for the fridge and the microwave is coming out really nice, but I just realized that the water heater goes underneath the stairs, and if I install the stairs first, I'm not gonna have any room to work on the water heater, so I'm gonna install it first, then I'll finish up the stairs. I started by installing the 20 amp receptacle that the water heater will plug into, then drilled a hole for my freshwater inlet and got it installed. I then went to town connecting all the PEX fittings that I got from plumbingcell.com, which will connect straight to the 10-gallon water heater that we picked up. I know the water heater's small, but this is a tiny home and we gotta work with the space that we have. I got the water heater installed and it looks pretty good. Now that that's finished up, I'm gonna go ahead and finish building out the stairs so we can finally get into the loft. Earlier in the video, I built this platform out of 2x4s that'll support the bottom part of my stairs. I wrapped it in plywood so it looks nice and also give it some extra support. Then drilled a bunch of pocket holes into it so I can screw in the steps. So I got my steps cut out and installed. We're gonna go ahead and put a piano hinge right here so this can open and close, allowing there to be storage inside of here just to maximize the space. Before installing the piano hinge, I figured I'd finish up the stairs because I still need to stain everything and that makes the most sense to me. I cut out this piece of butcher block because I'm going to be installing a cabinet underneath the stairs and this will work as a step. I then put them in their place to make sure they fit properly, then started working on my stair stringers. Cut out these pieces of plywood that will work as my stair stringers, but before I install them, I'm going to reinforce them with some 2x4s. Coming up with the design of these stairs was really difficult. There was just a lot of measuring involved and I'm not a stair expert, so it was just hard to come up with something that would look nice. And 2 solid days of planning, I finally came up with this contraption and I'm honestly kind of proud of it. It basically just sits on top of the countertop and goes onto the fridge cabinet that I built earlier, which should make it nice and easy to climb up into the loft. Stairs are finished up and they're looking really good. Now we're going to grout the tiled wall that we installed earlier so we can install the cabinets. I started by mixing some of this darker colored grout in a 5-gallon bucket till it was the consistency of something like peanut butter. I then brought it into the tiny home and used one of these soft grout floats to put it in between all the cracks. It took me about an hour and a half to do from start to finish and the grout ran me about $30, so it wasn't too bad. So I just finished up the grout and I have the state inspector here. Let's see what she thinks.
Approved. State inspection.
After passing that rough inspection, we brought the cabinets into the tiny home and got them installed. For the countertops, we picked up some of this butcher block and we put it into place temporarily so we can find out where the sink is gonna go. Alright, so I used the stencil that the sink came with to trace out onto this butcher block countertop. Now I'm gonna bring it out and cut it and hope that I don't mess this thing up. So I'm using this fine finish blade to cut it out and I'm honestly kind of nervous. Now I'm going to use this jigsaw with this fine cutting blade to cut out all the corners. After I cut out the sink, I stained the entire countertop, then realized that I forgot to cut the hole for the induction cooktop, so then I went ahead and did that. After cutting the hole, I dry fit the induction cooktop to make sure it fits properly. Then I applied some of this min-wax urethane to help keep the countertops protected, and I let them sit overnight before installing them. We took the tops off of all the stairs so we could paint everything, and Hope chose this nice blue color right here to give everything a pop, so let's see how it turns out. After an entire day of staining the countertops and painting, we let everything dry for the rest of the night so it can cure properly. Last night we stained and lacquered the steps and they look so freaking nice. Look at this. It has a nice sheen to it. Now we're gonna get them installed so then we can move on to the kitchen. So we got the kitchen finished up and all the stairs installed. Now we're gonna install the ceiling underneath the loft area. We're only installing 1/4-inch plywood on the ceiling underneath the loft, just to help reduce the amount of weight that this trailer is gonna hold. And at the end of the day, the ceiling's only gonna hold a couple of puck lights, so 1/4-inch plywood should do. With the ceilings all finished up, I'm gonna go ahead and fill all the cracks and holes with this caulk. So now that the ceiling underneath the loft is all finished up, we're on our way to the store right now to pick up some more wood so we can finish the rest of the ceiling. Got a bunch of these tongue and groove boards. Now we're gonna unload them, stain them, so we can install them onto the ceiling. Before we installed the ceiling, we had to stain it, so Hope went to town staining all the boards while I installed the insulation. I got all the insulation installed. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start installing all the boards. We cut the boards to size and use 18 gauge finish nails to secure them onto the roof, and we put a decent amount of them to make sure they don't fall off over time, and I really don't think they will because I think I put like 12 in each board. So this insulation is made to go on studs that are 16 inches on center, and since these are 24 on center, it's a little bit bigger. So instead of putting them like this, we're just flipping them sideways so they fit properly. Installing this insulation was backbreaking to say the least, but if you notice we're not installing the ceiling in the bathroom, that's because we're going to be installing the entire bathroom in a different video, because we're already over a month into this build and I need to post a video and take a small break. I'm gonna use this 6-inch hole saw to cut a hole in this board because that's where my lights are gonna go. We got the boards installed onto the ceiling. Now it's time to install these 6-inch puck lights. They come with individual ballast and they have 650 lumens, which should be plenty to light up this tiny home. To install them, it's super easy. You just remove the wires, pop this tab, then slide the main wire into the box. Then just connect the black wire to the black wire, the white to the white, and the ground to the ground, and that's it. To close up the box, just neatly tuck the wires back into it, close it, then slip it into the roof, and it also comes with this little ballast right here that you can adjust the different light temperatures. I set mine to medium, which is kind of the perfect medium between super bright and amber, but I then repeated the same process over and over until all the lights were installed. After installing the lights, I capped off the ridge beam with another piece of wood that I stained, and man oh man am I in love with the way that this thing is turning out. But then just like that, the ceiling was all finished up. We finally got the ceiling installed and now it's officially time to install the floor. In order to find out the color, we picked up these samples from Floret, which is a bunch of different planks, and they basically send it to your house so you can figure out what color floor you want. So these are the colors right here that they sent us, and we ended up going with this color right here. It's called Brenwick, and the reason we chose it is because it's not too light, but it's also not too dark. We wanted it to match the countertops and the ceiling a little bit. So let's get it installed and see how it looks. If you guys have watched my videos in the past, you know that I'm super picky with the type of flooring I choose to install into the tiny homes that I build. I've tried a bunch of different brands and they always snap when I try and clip them together, so that's the reason why I always spend the extra money to get my floors from Floret. They're made out of LVP, which makes them super durable, especially in high traffic areas, so that's another reason why I choose to install them into my tiny homes. And if you notice I'm not using an underlayment, that's because these floors already come with the high quality one built in. Guys, look at this intricate piece. It took me like 30 minutes to figure out the measurements and cut it out. Let's see if it fits. We also decided to install the same flooring in the loft instead of carpet, just because over time carpets get smelly and people spill stuff on them. So we figured just install flooring since it's 100% waterproof and it'll just last a lot longer. But I'm gonna put a 50% off link in the description below so you can get yourself a sample kit. So we finally got the floor finished up and it looks freaking beautiful. Now we're gonna install all the baseboards, finish painting, do a bunch of finishing touches, then install the refrigerator and try to finish this project up. So everything's coming along really well, but one thing that I've been procrastinating is this water heater / under the stairs area. So I cut out a bunch of pieces of wood to try and cover it up. So now I'm gonna install them and let's see how it comes out. I added a couple extra pieces of blocking to be able to hold up my countertop. And since I had a couple extra pieces of 1x2s, I cut them out, painted them white, and put them onto this cabinet face to give it a nice slatted look. I then went ahead and installed it, and the reason I'm not putting hinges is because I don't want people opening this thing up and filling it up with storage and somehow ruining the water heater. So after a couple of hours, it actually looks pretty damn good. I'm really happy at the way it turned out. We added an extra countertop and then added some slats that we painted white. We screwed it in, but it's removable just in case anybody needs to work on the water heater. This top part is also removable, so you'll have full access to it if it needs to be maintenance or anything like that. But now that that's all finished up, we're gonna install the refrigerator, the microwave, and do some final touches so we can finally finish this project up. After installing the fridge and the microwave, it was finally time to start building out the bathroom. I started by installing some of this R13 insulation in between all the studs. This bathroom's 3.5 feet wide by 8 feet long, which is small, but we came up with a pretty badass design that should make this tiny home bathroom feel somewhat luxurious. After installing the insulation, I picked up a bunch of pieces of shiplap and started cutting them down to size. I then brought them into the tiny home and started installing them onto the wall with my 18 gauge finish nailer. Each piece of shiplap ran me $10 and I needed a total of 32 of them, which brings the total to $320 to cover the walls of this bathroom, which is pretty expensive, but it's better than having to install sheetrock and spending days sanding and mudding everything, which makes spending the extra money worth it to me. After installing the shiplap, I figured it was a good idea to start painting the walls so I don't accidentally get white paint on anything. Now that I have all the shiplap installed and painted, I'm going to go ahead and install the mixer valve for the shower head right here. Now I'm going to have to remove some of this insulation to get access to it, but I'll go ahead and install it back on after I install the mixer valve. I installed a piece of blocking onto the wall where the mixer valve is going to go, and it's exactly 1 inch thick to allow the mixer valve to pop out of the wall just enough to be able to put the handle on. I made sure it was plumb and square, then secured it onto the blocking. I then ran the cold and hot water lines to the mixer valve and the drop ear. For the drop ear, I also added a piece of blocking so it pops out of the wall enough, then wrapped the threads in Teflon tape before screwing it onto the PEX fitting. I then screwed it into the blocking exactly 6 feet 4 inches off the ground. So it's finally time to install the shower base, and we're getting a custom one made from my guys at Encompass Shower Base. So I'm gonna hit them up right now and find out where the hell this thing is. Yo.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, question. I'm just calling to check up on that shower base, see how it's coming along.
Absolutely, man. We just finished it up. Made it custom for you. Here it is right here.
Amazing, dude.
And we're gonna ship that out to you right away, okay? You'll get it in a couple days.
Hell yeah, man. I love it. I love it.
So, gonna throw in one of these too. This is that wall shower niche we were talking about. And it's totally waterproof, made out of that Corian solid surface too. You can put that in the wall. That way the whole thing is waterproof, all right?
Dude, that looks amazing, man. That looks great. I can't wait to get it.
Awesome. It'll be there soon. Talk to you later, Manny.
All right, dude. Peace. Can't wait to get it.
1 week later.
We finally got the shower base.
The reason we wanted to get one of these shower bases is because the installation process is about 10 times faster than installing a traditional shower base. You just have to drill a hole for the plumbing pipe, then notch out a groove into the subfloor that the shower pan can fall into, then add some silicone, drop it into the groove, and that's it. Before dropping the shower pan into the floor, I installed one of these PVC plumbing rings so it's easier to plumb it from underneath. I then added some of this 100% silicone underneath, plopped it into the floor, and that was it. This is called the Encompass Shower Base. They custom make them and ship them directly to your house. I'll link them in the description below. We made sure that the shower basin would be pitched so that the water can go down the drain. Then we decided to add one of these little ledges so we can put things like shampoo bottles on, or to make it easier to shave your legs. Not that I shave mine. I then removed some insulation and added some blocking so we can install the shower niche. Then got straight to work so we can get all the curdy board installed onto the walls. We chose to use 1/2-inch curdy board because it's the easiest way to install walls onto your shower before adding any type of tile. But the main reason that we chose it is because it's really lightweight and we want to keep the weight down in this tiny home because after all it is on a trailer and we don't want to go over 14,000 pounds. But we then repeated the same process over and over until all the curdy board was installed. Now that all the curdy board is installed onto the walls, we mixed together some of this mortar so we can waterproof all the cracks. This step was pretty straightforward. We basically spread a layer of the mortar onto the curdy board, then pressed down some of this curdy band to completely waterproof it. I tried to lay everything as flat as possible so that when I lay my tiles, they'll also lay nice and flat. For the corners, I just folded a piece of this curdy band in half, then stuck it into the corner, and that was it. But I then repeated the same process over and over until all the curdy band was installed. Now that the curdy board is installed, it's time to install the tile. But since there's a slope in the shower base, we're gonna have to cut the tile to match that slope so they can be nice and level. Before installing the tile, I spread a layer of 100% silicone in between the curdy board and the shower base, just to seal it up so no water ever gets in there. The first row of tiles is gonna get silicone instead of mortar, because the shower base is made out of Corian, which is a solid surface material that mortar won't stick as well to, so that's why we're adding silicone instead. The rest of the tiles are going to get glued on with mortar, and we're using 1/4 inch spacers to space all of them apart. But speaking of showers, I'm going to tell you guys a funny story. Over this past Christmas break, we went over to my wife's parents' house, and I went a little overboard drinking Moscow Mules. It was a great night, but I figured let me try and sober up before going to bed. So I decided to get into the shower, and that's where I made my first mistake. I fell over onto this porcelain soap dish and completely broke it off the wall. Somehow, someway, I didn't even have a scratch on me, and the craziest part is that it was like 1 in the morning, so everyone was asleep, and somehow nobody heard it. So now I gotta replace this porcelain soap dish, but I'm thinking I might just redo their whole shower. But let's get back to the video. Now that all the tiles are installed, I mixed together some of this sanded grout so I can fill in all these 1/4 inch gaps. Since the grout dries pretty fast, Hope and I decided to work as a team. I filled in all the cracks while she used a damp sponge to remove the excess. We then repeated the same process over and over until all the grout was installed. After finishing up all the grout, I used some more silicone to install the shower niche into the wall. And man oh man, this thing was starting to look freaking crazy. We then went ahead and installed the shower handle and the shower head, which really brought everything together, and we were honestly really impressed at how well everything turned out. But then just like that, the stand-up shower was completely installed. Now that the stand-up shower is finished up, it's time to install the toilet. I drilled a 3.5 inch hole into the subfloor, then glued on some PVC onto the toilet flange and slid it into the hole. I then made sure that the bolts to hold the toilet were the same distance from the wall and dry fit the toilet. Before permanently installing the toilet, we had to do a few things like installing the floor and adding some baseboards. I also added some silicone where the shower base meets the subfloor, just to reduce the amount of water that can get down there. Installing the baseboards before permanently mounting the toilet makes things a lot easier. And we also decided to install a couple other things like the plumbing for the toilet and the barn door. This is just a $200 door that we picked up on Amazon, and we decided to install a barn door instead of a regular one, just to try and save some space when you open and close it. We then capped off the entryway with some door trim, then brought the toilet into the bathroom to finally get it installed. I first flipped it over so I can install the wax ring, then fit the wax ring directly over the toilet flange and screwed it down. I then fit the tank into place and tightened that down as well. Installed the toilet seat, then ran the water supply to the tank, and that was it. After finishing up with the toilet, we wanted to install a small sink. When I framed out the bathroom, I made sure to add some blocking where the sink is gonna go, just so it has something strong to hold onto. I crimped down the shutoff valves to the hot and cold water, then connected the sink faucet. I made sure to add a P-trap for the drain and plumbed it down toward underneath the tiny home. I then installed the trim around the bathroom window, which I've been procrastinating to do for about a month for some reason, and installed a medicine cabinet with a mirror right above the sink. To cap off the plumbing that's under the sink, I built this little box just to make things look a little better. I then crawled underneath the tiny home and connected all the plumbing pipes from the toilet, sink, and drain, and made sure to pitch the plumbing downward so all the water goes downhill. To hold up the plumbing, I picked up some of these galvanized metal strips and screwed them directly into the subfloor frame. I filled in all the gaps with spray foam, then just like that, all the plumbing was completely installed. After going on waterdropfilter.com and finding out that my tap water is not safe to drink, I decided to install one of these water filtration systems. This is a tankless reverse osmosis system that purifies water on demand, and if you know me, I'm obsessed with making sure we have clean drinking water, so installing one of these was a must. I drilled a hole into the sink and installed the faucet, then went underneath to connect the water supply and made sure to use Teflon tape to ensure this thing doesn't leak. This is a WaterDrop X Series filtration system, and it's 75% smaller than the average RO filtration system, which saves you a ton of space under your sink, and it looks really nice too. It'll also save you a bunch of water with its 3:1 water ratio, and it also adds alkaline minerals back into the water as well. I then went up top to mess around with the settings a little bit, and what's super cool is that you can adjust the amount of ounces that this thing will spit out, which is perfect especially if you have some type of recipe that requires an exact measurement. It also has a special UV light that removes bad odors from the unit. If you guys want to get one, I'll link them in the description below. Now that the plumbing and the filtration system is installed, it's time to install the AC unit. This is a 12,000 BTU AC unit that's made by Costway, and it should be perfect to keep this tiny home nice and cool in the summer. After installing the mounting brackets, I wired up the electrical wires, connected the drip hose, then carefully bent back the copper lines so I can slide them through the hole that I put into the wall. I slid the copper lines, drip hose, and the electrical wires through the hole, then mounted the AC head. I then went outside and put together the mounting bracket that'll hold up the condenser unit. I had to notch out some of the board and batten on the exterior so I can mount down the mounting bracket, which I bolted directly into the studs, but then I installed the AC condenser and bolted that onto the bracket as well. I then had to connect the wire and the AC lines that we slid through the wall earlier into the AC condenser. So I took off the electrical cover and slid the wire through the hole so I can connect it to the bus bar. This was pretty straightforward. You just connect the corresponding wire to the letters on the bus bar and that's it. I then installed the copper lines, wrapped them in the AC tape that they gave me, then installed the cover. After connecting the wire and the copper lines, it was time to run the electrical. Since this is a 240 volt system, I'm using 10-3 Romex to connect it to my breaker panel. I'm running the wire through 1/2 inch conduit that I'm installing on the outside of the tiny home, which I measured and cut the size, and I used PVC cement to make sure it's 100% waterproof. I then ran my snake through the conduit, taped it, then pulled the wire through. And I couldn't have done it without the help of my wife, so if you're listening, thank you, honey. After running the wires through the conduit, we had to install a disconnect box in between the AC condenser and the breaker panel. We then wired the Romex into the AC condenser, installed a 30 amp breaker onto the panel, then called the AC technician to pump the lines filled with Freon, and that's it. This Pulseway air conditioner comes in a kit. If you guys want to get one, I'll link them in the description below. After the AC was installed, I wanted to wire up some lights on the outside of this tiny home. So I picked up these black exterior lights from Amazon for like 80 bucks, then got them installed. We then swept and vacuumed the entire tiny home and used our Viper Shield product in the shower to protect all the walls. Viper Shield is a product that my wife and I created a while back that protects all types of surfaces like tile, glass, mirrors, and paint. It's super hydrophobic and keeps surfaces cleaner for longer, so if you guys want to support the channel, get yourself a bottle. I'll link it in the description below. After cleaning everything up really nice, the entire tiny home was all finished up. This entire tiny home took us just over 3.5 months to complete and ended up costing us $34,770. We spent weeks editing everything together, so I hope you guys really enjoyed this clip. click subscribe, and I'll see you on the next.